Yes, yes. Welcome back to the Black Currency Podcast. This is Bradley DLO Thomas. By day, I am now an IT professional, formerly a marketing professional. By night, I love to produce and MC, aka write songs. So I'll pass the microphone.
Hey, what's up? It's your girl, Opal Elisa. By day, I'm Director of Multicultural Business Strategy for a large financial company. I'm also a author, MC, poet, spoken word artist, all of the above. I'll pass the mic.
What's going on? My name is Corey Whitmore. By day, I'm here at Media 22, as you can see with the green screen in the back. By night, I'm here at Media 22. You can see the green screen in the back. But I also love to do music. I still produce, I still engineer. Having a hard time writing lately, but those other two things seem to be working for me well.
Good, good, good. I know we were talking a couple of days about that. I was getting on your case. Corey, you guys, I know you got something to share with the world, but we have a person today who has a lot to share with us, and I have tons and tons of questions. But before we get into it, let me let you know who you're talking with. Today we have Daryl Smith, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Kettler. I pronounced that correctly, right, Daryl?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And he has over 20 years of experience in the multifamily marketing field, as well as other fields that we're going to get into in terms of marketing, digital media, and other things related to operations. So today we're going to really dive deep with him. First thing that I want to let all the listeners know, no matter what media that you're on, if you can see me on the video right now, you can see that I have a notebook. So please take some notes today. We were just talking with him earlier. I would say literally about 2 minutes ago, I took some notes from that. So you're definitely going to want to, kids, put your thinking caps on today, open your ears and your eyes, because he's going to have a lot to share with us. So Daryl, welcome today. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yes, thank you. And sounds like I'm in good company of inspirational thinkers around not only my field of marketing, but multiculturalism and certainly entrepreneurialism. So I'm really happy to be here at home with y'all.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're from Alabama. You spent some time in Madison. Now you're in DC. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey becoming a marketing executive, and where it's taken you so far?
So whenever I get asked that often, and whenever I answer that question, I start off by saying, if you think of the Wizard of Oz, I have followed a very long yellow brick road, but it's certainly been fruitful for me. It started in Mobile, Alabama, where I was born and raised. My parents went to school at the University of Wisconsin, and so I did spend some time in my early childhood there. And then my parents moved back to Alabama. My father got into politics and was a mayor for a little while. And then post high school, I went to undergrad at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Got an undergrad degree in broadcasting, and from there I moved back to Wisconsin and attended the University of Wisconsin, where I got a master's in journalism. And while there, I worked for the local PBS station, Wisconsin Public Television, for a little while. Loved it. I thought, man, I'm going to be here the rest of my life, having a great time. Phone rings one day. I get a call from the PBS station in DC saying they were interested in me. And I was like, no, I don't want to go. And my mentor at the time, who was head of Wisconsin Public Television, was like, look, you got to take this job. It's a great opportunity. It's the number 3 station in the country. He struck me a deal. He said, if you don't like it, I'll bring you back and we'll put you in any position you want. I'm like, okay. So I moved kicking and screaming. And about 6 or 7 months in, I'm like, man, I love this place. This is great. About 6 months later, after I'd been there a year, I got an offer at the network, the PBS headquarters, which is also based in the DC area. Got to a great job there in operations, broadcast operations that distributes programming. And one day I got a call from that same mentor from Wisconsin Public Television. He said, hey, I'm in the building. I'm going to stop by and say hi. I said, all right. Met him at the elevator. We walked to my office and he said, hey, do you still want to come back? I'm like, no, I'm having a good time. This is great. I've got my second job, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I knew it. He said, I really wanted you to get out there. You're young. I want you to see what the opportunities were. And, sometimes you can't get those things back. And I really appreciated that from him. And even from the first time that I had a chance to spend some time with him, he was a really strong mentor towards me. He came into my office when I was at Wisconsin Public Television. I'd always wanted to meet him. And he was the president of Wisconsin Public Television. And he took time to come by one day and talk to me. And in 30 minutes of talking to me, he said, hey, I want to work on something for you. And I thought, he's just giving me, polite talk. 2 weeks later, he promoted my boss and moved me into her role. I had never spent any time with him up to that point. So he was a very authentic person. That's when I would say I first learned about what authentic people are and what authentic people do. From Wisconsin Public Television, as I often say, I spent 10 years there, and I often tell people Big Bird got his wings clipped back in about 1999 when all television networks were making the transition to digital. And so on that, was a huge opportunity, but yet a huge impact to the labor force. So much like myself, there were many people who were in the television environment that were laid off, and it was very competitive to get, other jobs at that time. So I had a friend who he and his wife owned a temp company that specialized in the multifamily industry. And they're like, hey, why don't you come work in our office, for a few days a week and until you decide what you want to do. So I did. And one day they said, hey, can you help fill a role on site one day, at an actual property? I'm like, doing what? And so they're like, just go fill in, help out with leasing. I'm like, okay, whatever that is. So I go to this property, end up being on assignment for about 6 months. And about 3 months in, somebody from the corporate office was visiting and said, hey, are you interested in a job? And I, at that time, I kind of was, I didn't know what the expression not too proud to beg meant. So I work in television. I don't know what this apartment stuff is. And so another 6 months go by and I realized there is no more television for a while. And so I go back and knock on that door and I said, all right, tell me about this opportunity. And so, as they say, the rest was history. I've been in the industry ever since. And it's been a great opportunity to start a completely different career over. And I started literally from the ground up as a marketing coordinator, marketing manager, marketing director, national marketing director, and then to my current role now. And I've been very fortunate to work for initially very large national brands, the top 3 in the country. Handling and overseeing national marketing. So it's been a tremendous opportunity. Lots of people who were both mentors to me, but lots of folks who really gave me opportunity that I don't think if I didn't have my brand persona, if you will, in the right order, I wouldn't have had those opportunities.
Thanks for the breakdown. I can see why you were so successful on radio, because your voice alone is something that I could just listen to for a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. You just
get that compliment often.
For sure.
Yeah, I already have like 3 pieces of notes.
Yeah.
Off the dial.
Talking about. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And as you were sharing it, I could just like see you in these spaces. And one thing that just rose to the top was like, you must do really good work to have folks want to tap you and say, hey, you want to work here, or I have an opportunity for you. So I know later on we'll get into personal brand, but I just want to put that out there. So
yes,
that was seen to be.
There's definitely a correlation, I think, to personal brand and how individual self shows up. So yes, absolutely.
Yes. The other thread that came through that piece was just that passion that you have for your work. So where does that come from? Kind of what's your why? What can you share with our listeners that what really drives you in the work that you do?
So I absolutely love marketing. I love communication in general. And I think for me as a chief marketing officer, one of the things that I believe in is telling a story and having imagination behind that story. And to be a marketer, you have to have a lot of aspirational vision to really think about what is your brand about? How do you help that brand imagine itself? And how do you help connect that to consumers? And so that gives me a lot of open space in my role to be able to think about my current organization in a lot of distinct and diverse ways. And I'm also very fortunate to have a partner in my leader, the president of our organization, who gives me, as I tell her all the time, I say, I feel like I'm in Disney World. I mean, you don't sit on top of me. I have a full, wide open runway to do whatever I'd like to do. But I'm also smart enough to know that marketing is one of those areas that's always first to cut. And so I've had to work really hard to position myself very close to my boss as a president as both a strategic means to create value, not only for my organization that I oversee, but also for her. So I'm able to align a lot of my imagination to her business plans. And she's constantly telling me, man, you popped out 10 great things this month. I really appreciate it. And, let's keep thinking about this. I want you to work on this project with me. And I've been very fortunate that it's positioned me in a very key and principal light, I'm with her, amongst my peers who know, wow, Daryl's got her ear. And if Daryl calls and asks for something, or I need to be mentored on something, I'm going to go to him. But again, as we'll get into later, to me, that goes to your personal, persona. How is your personal brand showing up, and how do you manage that in your roadmap for success?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I hope y'all heard that. Position yourself as a strategic means. That's a gem right there. That is so key. Like you said, marketing can be the first to go, but I think for any position, that thing right there is huge.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
sorry, I can see Corey itching to ask.
You know I am. I'm trying to follow a roadmap for our listeners. I want them to be able to and not just go into my head to be like, oh, can I pick this out and pick this out? Maybe a little later though. One common thing that we've found with all of our guests is that there's been some sort of philosophy or set of principles that they have held tight to that has allowed them to continue to make the progress and to achieve all of these different things like yourself. So my question to you as of right now is there a particular life philosophy or a set of principles that you've kind of always referenced or gone back to say, hey, this is the foundation of who I am. This is what I believe in. And this has enabled me to be able to make these leaps and bounds in my space.
100%. And if you indulge me here for a good 5 minutes, because I love to talk, by the way, I'll tell you a story that leads into, I'll cut it short, but I'll tell you a story that leads into, I would say 4 principles that also I found out later from a gentleman named Dan Olawabi. His last name is spelled Olowabi. And he is into a body of work called authentic leadership. And when I read his about some of his work and some of his practice, it took me back in time, and it really encapsulates a lot of the principles that you're talking about. But I'm going to start with the story first. Back in when my family moved back to Alabama, my mom and dad put me in a Catholic school, and I'd been in some Catholic schools when I was in Madison. And when I moved back to Mobile, they continued that practice. And I went to for a year. I went to a Catholic high school in Mobile, and the first year I never was good at math, and so I was always that person that couldn't go out to recess because I had to sit there and finish my computation. And so while I was in high school, they had a system at the time, and I don't know if they still do, but they had a system at the time that if you weren't performing to what's called regular math or regular history, regular biology, you were an alternative. And the idea behind that is, if you achieve a certain GPA, then you can move into the regular format. And so my mom had a PhD in education, or has a PhD in education. And so at the end of that first year, she didn't want me to go back. My dad was like, you can do whatever you want to do. And of course, at that time, you're thinking about your social status. I got to be around my friends in high school. My mom was like, no, you're going to public school. In fact, you're going to the same high school that me and your dad went to. And then that's that. So, being kind of mischievous in high school, I kind of went to my dad and was like, Dad, Mom said I can't go. And Dad, I guess you just tell her you'd like to go there, blah, 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 have a conversation. So the night before school started, I went and said, Daddy said that I could, which now that I'm an adult, I'm sure she was livid and saying, oh, your daddy said when I told you. Okay. So my mom, she didn't say anything, which I thought was odd. So I'm like, that's strange. She said, okay, well, we're going over to the school tomorrow. I'm like, all right. So we get in the car. She's quiet. My mom is dressed to the nines. This is 1984, 85. And so we get to the school, and the principal, who was white, my mom starts asking questions about the program. And he says, people like Daryl, typically when they're finished, would then go on to do X. And my mom said, well, can I ask a few more questions about that? So what you're telling me is, if he continues in this alternative program, and so this year, let's just say you're getting ready to put him back in it yet a second year, and yet a third year, if he's not successful, he will still be an alternative math, meaning he's not getting algebra, he's not getting geometry, therefore he's not getting those core courses that he needs to get into college. Mm-hmm. And so he goes, correct. And she goes, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. So then he can't go to college at this point because he doesn't have the core courses to get in. And he says, that's correct. So people, and use this word again, people like him would then typically go to a trade school. She goes, oh, well, tell me about that. And so then he got very specific about a local trade school that was all Black. And so my mom's like, okay. And then so she said, so let me just sum this all up. At the end of the day, when we're paying for him to get a college prep education, You're saying that at the end of the day, he will be eligible to go to a 2-year school. And then when he's done there, he will find a trade. And he said, yes. And so she said, let me tell you who I am. She said, my name is Dr. She said, let me tell you who I am. My name is Dr. Barbara Wheat Smith. And my degree is in education. And I've studied this exact phenomenon when I was in school, and it's called tracking, where you take disadvantaged minority students and instead of elevating them, you relegate them. Mm-hmm. And now at this point, I'm 14, 15, and I'm kind of sliding down. I'm like, oh no, this is going left. Not understanding fully what's happening, right? The big picture. I'm just like, man, she going in on this, man. It sounds good. But then I'm kind of like, what's happening? The man turned red. And she said, also, let me reintroduce myself again. I'm Dr. Barbara Wheat Smith, the first lady of the city. And again, the man turned green, right? Not knowing who he's talking to. And it really didn't matter. But the concept of how he was trying to control who I was and create a value for who I am and was going to define it led to me believing that no one defines or creates value for me but myself. And I'll never forget when we pulled off from that school. My mom is a smoker. She had that cigarette. She said, she looked over at me, not in a way that was, it was very empathetic. And she said, I know you're embarrassed. I know you feel some sort of way about what just happened. When you get older, you'll understand what that was about. And you fast forward several years later, as I started competing to be in the boardroom, to get to the C-suite, it's defining and owning my value and knowing who I am. And that nobody controls that but me. And so this Dan Olowabi has, in his authentic approach to leadership, has 4 things that he looks at. And one is understand yourself, lead yourself, understand others, and then that helps you to have the confidence to lead others. And one of the biggest things that we don't have in understanding the value about who we are is having that confidence. And everybody struggles with some level of insecurity to have that confidence about who you are. Am I saying something that's making an impact? Am I saying something that makes sense? And so when I stumbled on his work just a few years ago, I'm like, oh man, that's it. That's that concept of having that value and knowing who you are so that you can be positioned to execute in any way you aspire to be and to do. So I would say, again, in keeping the cliff notes for you, it's really understanding your value and knowing who you are. And I'll add one more quick story to that and how I had to position that very recently. I had a conversation with a boss one day who had been telling me for years, let's just say for 2 or 3 years, like, hey, you hit it so hard this first year. I want to relook at your package. Okay, great. That sounds good to me. Year goes by, nothing. Second year goes by, nothing. Third year, I say, hey, I remember you said about 2 years ago you wanted to revisit my package because each year the boss kept saying, wow, I'm really impressed, would give me 100% of my bonus. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm hitting the mark. I should be getting a salary change. She looked at me and she said, are you asking me for a raise? I said, no, not at all. I'm following up to your question. I serve at your pleasure. And she laughed and she goes, yeah, well, let's talk about it. So we finally talked about it. And at the time of the year, it was just before the traditional merit increase. And she said to me, I'll give you 5% now. And if you give me a couple of months, I'll give you 5% later. I said, so basically you're giving me a merit increase. Mm-hmm. Oh, was that offensive? No, I told you I serve at your pleasure, but I also know my value. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you a story. I told her the same story I told you guys. Mm-hmm. This is a Friday. Mm-hmm. Friday between 3 and 5, we had this 2-hour conversation. We happened to have a meeting on the books that Monday at 8:30 about something completely different. When I got on the call, she went right to our last conversation and said, I couldn't sleep all weekend thinking about our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I love how you talk to me. I love how articulate you are about things, blah, blah, blah. And I've come up with, revised the plan. And what she came up with shocked me because the number was an odd number, meaning even numerically, right? She hit on the exact cent, and it represented a 29% raise compared to her trying to do a 10%. Right. And again, know your value and don't be afraid to position that value by knowing who you are and having that confidence to lead people, just like Dan Olowabi talks about, to lead people to your aspiration.
Beautiful story.
Yes.
inspirational story on so many levels, because I know there's somebody out there right now that's, no matter what position that they're in their organization, or even if they are entrepreneur, and they're they're during those conversations where they need to have that confidence and that posture. So everybody who's listening, you might want to rewind the last 5 minutes. 'Cause that's exactly what I'm going to do, just to keep it honest. So you did mention your mother, Dr. Barbara Wheat Smith. I think that it's clear that she's one of your mentors. I'm very curious on your process of how you actually chose your mentors. I think we've talked about on other podcasts the need to have somebody to follow and to model, but I don't know if we've ever talked about how to choose the right person to follow. And I'm interested to see what your approach has been in regards to that topic.
You know what? That's a great question. I'm going to answer it in a non-traditional way. I would say most of my mentors chose me, and it was because of, again, that personal brand, being in the right place, interacting with people who saw something in me that I may not have saw it myself, around my aspirations. And as you guys have been, my passion, which has always been there. And so they took me under their wings, so to speak. But I think in connecting further to that, because there are opportunities to choose mentors, in addition to the traditional approach of, I want to find somebody who I admire, someone who has passion, someone who is authentic, and someone who really has developed a career path to lead to some successful goals that you can truly see. They're not talking, blue pie in the sky. They're really talking about something that they can see and something that they've done, and how they continue to be motivated to do that. And so, but who is that person for you? And sometimes the people that you're looking for are right there in your face. It could be your family. It could be some very close friends. It could be somebody at work. It's when you start talking and engaging and being authentic to yourself, as I was just saying earlier, people also pick that up and they want to be a part of that in some way. You guys on the call may hang up and say, call me next week and say, hey, Daryl, I was thinking about something you said, and I want to talk to you about that. I want to connect you on something, because guess what? I'm a consider myself a lifelong learner. So even though I've achieved success of where I'm at now, I still want to achieve more. There's lots of things I want to do. And therefore, anybody can continue to teach me and continue to nurture me around their respective space. So I think mentorship can take many different forms, but I think in a lot of cases, you don't realize people are right there before you.
Absolutely. There's so much, like DLO said. I'm rewinding that story again too, and I know your mom. She is one of my biggest and first top role models. So when you were talking about her talking to you with the cigarette, I wish they could hear it. Smooth and so smart and so everything. So thank you for sharing that. And shouts out to all the mamas who are doing that, showing up for their kids, because here in Madison and many other places, if you don't show up for Black boys every single day in a certain way, typecast real quick. So shouts out to her for doing that, and for you for capturing it. Like you said, you're 14 and 15, you're absorbing it, but you take it with you this whole time. So I wanted to get into, marketing is a huge piece of business, but really wanted to understand, what characteristics do you see in a leader? And one of the things that already has come through in both the story about your mom and you, and that story with your boss and leading to that raise, was just the poise that y'all had, right? Like you had it all and you held it, and then you let it go in such a, all I can say is poised way. So what are some of those characteristics? And do you agree with that poise piece? And then what are some other characteristics?
100% agree with the poise piece. I think the poise piece comes even more importantly for people of color, where you are typecast, so that when you are speaking up for yourself, whether you're a man or woman, you start to get this dissension of, oh, if you're a Black woman, you're this angry woman and she's mad. How dare she speak up for herself in the way she's articulating herself? In other cases, if you're I'm crying and I'm so upset, I don't know what's going on, I'm helpless, then you get the power structure that feels like I have to help you, I can help you. But if you're a Black woman, there's a threat. Similar to the woman's experience, Black men also have to be thoughtful about how they articulate themselves and how they express themselves, because equally that can be perceived as threatening. I've had people act like they're afraid of me when I speak up, like, oh my God, he said something so, and I've never been spoken to like that. But Bob just told you basically in the meeting you were dumb and you didn't even say anything. He just talked down to you, but now I'm talking to you in a more thoughtful way, and somehow that's threatening. And to that extent, my father, rest in peace, when I was a little boy, would always sit in the kitchen and I would look at a dictionary. And I think this is how one of the reasons why I got into communications was we would spend time looking at words, understanding what they mean. I was always asking what something meant. And so whenever I started getting to work environments where I would write, when I had an opportunity to speak, people would always say, "You're so articulate." And I could take that in two ways. Some ways it was like, "Great, you're being authentic." Other ways it's this shock. Who are you? Where'd you come from? You're different. And that I'm not supposed to represent that because there's this typecast, there's this bias that's being played. So I think it is important, again, for you to understand your personal self, your personal identity, and that value, and be confident about what you're saying and how you present that so that people truly receive you. If not, they're going to get hung up on all these other things that they're looking for. And when they don't see them, that smoke sort of blows away and they're allowed to fully see you. They're allowed to see you as what I call visible. Some people don't see you as visible, and some people do. And visibility takes a lot of different format, but visibility in its own sense means you recognize me for who I am. And I could be a lot of different things. I am not one thing. I'm a diversity and representing a community that's all things. And so, but that's a path, right? And I don't necessarily hold the band up for all the different groups that I represent and all the different groups I'm a member of. I represent a segment of the diversity of that. So I think, it's extremely important to what you asked.
That was so deep what you said in terms of the line where they get hung up on looking for the things that they're looking for to see.
Right.
I like how you separated that from the you as an individual and how you see yourself, because that's very important. So that was thank you. That was
absolutely.
That goes right into the branding, public persona, and a number of other things I would almost love to go on a tangent right now about.
Let's go.
Behind the
Let's
scenes.
go, Curry.
I'm staying focused, y'all. Many times with our guests, and some listeners I've talked to, sometimes they feel intimidated because we bring on a guest and they have all these accolades and of all these things that they've accomplished. And the recent conversation that I was talking with someone about was it's all a process. And in the music world, we used to use, we don't do CDs anymore, but compilation. Where it's a combination of of a couple of different things. And I try to explain to folks like there's always steps and levels that someone is building. And now you've seen a lot of the folks that we've had on. Now you're seeing all those things that make them up to be who they are. I give an example with my journey, and my first business was having a record label, and my second business now is more media based. But I couldn't do this job without having the experience of doing the record label stuff. All those lessons helped me to prepare me for this next step for this business. It wasn't that, I just had the answers and, and it just all came to me. I was able to jump into it. No way. If I hadn't had that previous experience, I would not be able to do what I'm doing right now. So with that being said, what for you, especially in the with WPR and the public television in that space, what are some of the things that you were able to take away, some of the skill sets you're able to learn that really helped to build you up and build up that personal brand?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple. One, most importantly, was just the field practice. So at Wisconsin Public Television, I transitioned from the journalist side of things to more of the operational technical sides, meaning the delivery of the programming to on air. And that was valuable for me because even, I should say that fostered my love of technology and innovation. And so I was very fortunate in the role that I had there at 25 years old. When I got that promotion that I spoke of earlier, I was elevated to a role where I had 25 people under me, and it was all in the tech operations center. And that was a pretty big responsibility. And that group was responsible literally for what was called master control. And that just means with the 3 channels, they would actually hit the buttons to run the programming. I would help with the scheduling, and then I would also manage the team that would be there for each one of those services in their training at that time. And so my roles after that in television were all around technology. And then when I got to PBS, I got into station relations, which coupled with the innovation and technology, I started to learn, how does a brand communicate? How does it express itself? And then, which was a great runway for me to then transition and start a whole new career over for the next 25 years in marketing. So the practice was in technology and communications. And then there's the leadership challenge, how I had to learn then, hey, I've never managed anybody before. Somebody just said, I'm giving you 25 people. Now, what do I do with it? Some are full-time, some are part-time, some are much older than you who are looking at you like, how did he get it? I've been here longer than him. So there's that confidence, right? You have to really understand self to lead self so that you can lead others, much like Dan Olawabi has in his authentic leadership practice. And that's why I said before that resonated with me later when I discovered that, because really a lot of what I had to learn, even based on your question, encapsulates all of that. So the technology along the practice, learning the communication formation, coupled with leadership, I think in those early days in my time in public television, which was great, really fostered that. And I was really, really fortunate to have people in those early days who really, really cared a lot about me. They were very authentic. I mean, I've been extremely unfortunate in my career, and I'm highly humbled for that, to have people who, as I said, I didn't have to go find them. They interacted and found me. And I'm just truly blessed for that, because each one of those opportunities, as you were saying earlier, created that maturity for me to success. And if I hadn't, again, if that personal brand hadn't showed up in the right way, they wouldn't have taken those opportunities away.
Wow, that's a great path. I'm very curious about you've obviously are holding a very large title in a brilliant organization. What is it like being in the C-suite? What is it like being Black in the C-suite in your experience?
How much time do we have left?
I think I have to cut you off at 20 minutes. I'm very curious to see what
he was holding on to that one.
It's a deep one. It's a powerful one. And I will tell you this. I've been in this role for 6 years, and it fell in my lap a lot faster than I wasn't even looking. And my current boss found me, and we hit it off, and we've been stuck together since then. And it's been a great opportunity. But a lot I've had to learn through that. And Corey, when you were asking your previous question, it is a compilation, and I call it maturity. Just like I use my strategies to demonstrate the investment that I want out of a budget, how it's going to mature for the organization to have an impact at what given time, and what does that mean for revenue. Very similar for me personally in hitting that CMO journey. The first thing was, oh man, what have I done now? If I really oversold myself, can I really do this? And I'm a big history fan, particularly around early periods of African Americans in this country, particularly around enslaved and moving on forward. And a lot of what I did in graduate school was around media minorities as well, in terms of how we fit and how we plan to things. And I remember when I first got this role, I got real teary-eyed, and I was thinking about all the people, all the African Americans who worked so hard and who really risked a lot of their lives. Here I am, fulfilling a legacy, not only for African-American community, but I thought about my own family, who I think, Opal, you're aware that I've been doing a lot of genealogy work, and I've really gotten far. And I think about the history of those generations, particularly on my mother's side, that I've gotten detail on, where my grandfather, who was a successful business owner, had an 8th grade education. My mom was the first one in her family to go to college and get a PhD. She's got 3 children who all have masters. That's a generational maturity. And I take that seriously, because that's a lot of sacrifice. That's a lot of sacrifice. And I even tie that back to get out and vote. There are people who are sacrificed for us to continue to have these opportunities. And so when I got to the C-suite, I thought, man, this is a big weight. People have died and really suffered for me to have this opportunity. And so when I took it on, you get to the confidence, right? You've got all these people around you. I've got people staring at me. I was describing it at one point. It was like wolves in the woods staring at me for a while. And I knew the stare. The stare was, how did you get that job? Why are you here? And it felt cold and lonely for a while. But you have to rely on that confidence and the value that you have. And all I could think of was, I belong here. I belong here. The compilation, the maturity of my success has brought me here. I belong here. And so it started off the next level of maturity in my success and really understanding then, how do I transition to this next level? Because that is a different persona. And you really have to challenge yourself to be authentic in a lot of the ways that I said about how you communicate, how you execute your personal brand to get people to connect to you. How do you disarm them? How do you get them to respect you? And guess what? There's going to be a large percent that may not. So how do you manage them at least enough to know, don't come to my electric fence because you're going to get electrocuted. I tried to work with you one way, but you can't say it that way, right? You have to say it in a powerful way that they truly understand and respect you at the end of the day. And I know that words are the most powerful thing you can have in your persona to communicate who you are, to get that respect, even when they're not respecting you. I met a woman a couple of years ago. I was a chair of a conference, a big innovation conference in my industry for a couple of years, and I had the pleasure of introducing her. And I was walking down the hall to go to the main ballroom, and I suspected she was in front of me. And I said, "Hey, are you so-and-so?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, I'm Daryl Smith." She goes, "Oh, well, you'll be easy to remember because my brother's named Daryl." So we're talking, bonding. She's an African-American woman. Turns out she's from Birmingham. I'm from Alabama. So we're vibing on that vibe. And we asked for each other's card because we were clicking so well before everything kicked off. And she looked at it and she goes, "Oh, you really understand, don't you? You're going to really enjoy what I'm going to talk about." Mm-hmm. This lady is one of the most powerful speakers and has the best story I've ever heard. But it turns out she is the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, wow.
And her name just escaped me. But she blew me away. And she asked, to the question you just asked, brother, she, even when she got done, we looked at each other and we just hugged each other. Like I was just like trembling. She goes, "You really understand the struggle." And she was talking about her struggle with the C-suite, how in the term that I used earlier, she wasn't perceived as visible. She was, "Oh, that's nice. That's cute. You have an idea. Let me pat you on the head. Yeah, that's cute." But how do you earn your space so that people not only see you as, "Oh, he's here for diversity. He's here for window shopping. This person's here for that." And for a while, I truly thought my boss that I currently have, who I absolutely respect her to tears, I was having a conversation with her months after I started. And I had assumed, I was like, "Man, I love her. She's showing this world like, look what I went and found, and bam, he's here. Deal with it." And I was talking to her about that. She goes, "No, that wasn't it." And I didn't ask her in those terms. I asked her in a roundabout way, like, "Wow, I really like how you dedicate diversity and you brought me in and stuff." She goes, "Girl, that's not why I got you. I genuinely was connecting to your skills." And she wasn't really understanding what I was saying, but I appreciated her response because it wasn't about that. And if you think about what I said earlier, she was seeing even beyond me. She was seeing me as a person, as this man that's got a skill set that can help me. I don't care what his color is. I see him as somebody that's going to get me to green, if you want to look at it that way. So it is a journey. It is as they say, it is very lonely at the top. You don't have water cooler conversations with very people that you do lower and below. And you're like, "I heard that they're going to do X." There is no. And in a lot of cases, you have some rivalry with your peers. Because either they want a piece of your kingdom, or they're trying to get off stuff, or they're trying to deflect and blame you. And so you get into a whole lot of whatnot. And so, I had to learn how to play and participate in that. And then also, it's not just for me. I've got a whole team and 4 or 5 departments under me too that need me to have that value so that they can have the respect and that they can have those opportunities. So having that confidence to lead myself in that change is important. But I knew I belonged there, and this was where I needed to be, and I wasn't going anywhere. I think there was days where I thought, "You know what, forget this, I'm gonna hit it." And I'm glad I didn't, and I'm glad I stuck with my boss, who too was going through her own version of issues as a woman, as a leader. And she grew to become president since I've been there. And so, we went on a journey together. going through the same things. And I hear her oftentimes say, I really want to be respected for who I am and not this woman that gets, patted on the head. So it's been a great journey, but it is cold. And again, just like, Dan Oluwabi says, you've got to be able to understand yourself. You've got to develop your own confidence. And like I've said earlier, my thing is know your value. And when you know your value and you're being authentic and you're confident in that, it will transcend itself in a lot of different channels, that you're moving through. And that's that maturity, Corey, that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, another quotable, just like the maturity of my success has brought me here. Like so many gems. Like that's the one that I'm going to put on a sticky note, put by my monitor. When I feel imposter syndrome all up.
Right.
You said so many. You said so many good words, but that piece I just have to stick on. And I wanted to get into talking about traits of a good leader, but after you just shared, like that's way too basic. I do love that you talked about the relationship that you have with your current boss right now, and you said that you all journey together as she's now the president. What can you share about someone who has to be a good leader of a superstar? Because clearly you're a star. People see your value, your worth, and more importantly, you know your worth and your value. That is intrinsic and shines through. Our listeners can hear it right now. What does it take to lead someone like that? Because that can be difficult. And we got a lot of listeners who are also, like ourselves on here, we're superstars at work too.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they think the only thing to do is get out of your way. But what are the pieces that she's been able to do that has been a good leader for you?
Number one is, and again, it goes back to those 4 things about understanding yourself, leading yourself, listening to others so that you can have confidence to lead others. If you're not comfortable with yourself, you won't be successful leading somebody else to the success. Let me make that more transparent. I have a habit of, with my department heads, if they're working on an initiative, and my boss is always receptive to this, is I'll say, hey, I'm going to put you in front of her. I want you to tell her or talk to her about this strategy because it's key for something she's working on. She conversely loves that because she's like, you know what? You're not intimidated by them. You're not trying to hide them. You're not trying to take their work. You're a good leader. You're putting them in front of me. It gives them an opportunity to elevate, to understand how do I communicate to somebody at the next level. So they appreciate that I'm taking something that I perceive as positive and valuable and saying, hey, I'm going to nurture you. It's so important and so valuable to what the company's doing. I'm gonna put you in front of somebody. I don't need to take it and go and say, oh, look what Bobby Joe did today. But no, here's Bobby Joe. That's their visibility. And I'm comfortable enough, and again, confident in who I am, that I've set a strategy. This person has achieved something significant in the strategy. And guess what? Not only have I led them and helped shape what they're doing, but I can put them to the next level so that next level gets exposure to it. And my boss loves that all day long. And so for a leader, as you mature, you've got to know that there's different levels of people. And so how do you listen to them to understand how to nurture them so that they respect you? I have team members who I consider specialists. They're my department heads. Some of them, I've done their roles before. Some I have not. And in any case, even if I have, I don't sit on top of them. Some worry about like, hey, the department head came from your area. I bet he gets on you all day long, but I don't. I stay out of their space and allow for them to be who they are, to create that imagination, to be bold, and then to meet those strategic goals. But if you sit on top of somebody in the old top-down structure of an organization, you're not allowing somebody to identify who they are. And if I have this philosophy of for my department heads to have imagination, I have about 5 or 6 of what I call DNA traits that when I'm recruiting for both my leaders, and I tell them you should recruit for the same. One is imagination, to really think about something. One is being bold and really not trying to create a cookie cutter of something, but create a trail that's very differentiated and unique and different so that we can be competitive. But then it's also being committed. And committed means seeing it all the way through. You have the ability to get something through. You're not just imagining, you're not just talking, but you have a strategic roadmap that helps you get something done and accomplish to the bottom line. And so if you have that kind of talent you brought in, you can't sit on top of them. You've got to know that these are people bursting. They're trying to achieve what you've asked. But if you sit on them, what happens? One day they pull in the parking lot. They're like, oh, God, they're going to the car. I don't go up in here because he's just not going to let me be me. And I have to tussle with him. And he's going to take everything I give him and cross it off. And even when I'm talking to someone and giving them constructive feedback, I always start with what I like first. Like, hey, this is really good, but let's talk about this piece. I think what we can do is X. So then they get this full balance. I don't just start with like, yeah, I don't know about that. You've got to help people be inspired. And I consider myself an inspirational leader, yet running an innovative department. And again, that's knowing myself and who I am. And if that's knowing myself and who I am and how I perceive the world, I also have to manage the talent that I say I want and bring in. A lot of people say, yes, I want this great person, but how do you manage a great person? And how do you manage a person that's at a VP level versus a person that's at a manager level? Those are two different people, right? And they need two different things. A person at the VP level is much more elevated. They're mature. They don't need you sitting on them. A person that's at a manager level does need a little bit more nurturing. They do need you to sit on them. You can't give them that room because guess what? They're probably going to fail because they don't have the maturity to have that kind of space.
Yes. Ooh. I want to inject that into every single leader of every organization. Nonprofit. That was fire.
Well, you know what else, though? I learned about 10 years ago, I read some business journal, and it said that 90% of managers and leaders fail. They're not good. And if you rewind the tape in your life and you think about, Opal, that passionate articulation you just said, that means that we all have experienced more times than not someone that's just not a good leader. Someone's just not a good manager. And it makes sense. And that's because if you're not being authentic to yourself, and as Corey, you and Brad have asked, what's your philosophy? And are you living by it? I just had a debate with, unfortunately, with a distant cousin who was talking about being in their truth. And I thought in my mind, like, are you serious? And it really comes back to what we're talking about, because if you're living your truth, people don't have room to doubt. They have room to respect and understand. And it's a difference. And I hate when somebody uses, and I'm glad you guys have asked a lot about philosophy and can see in my story how the philosophy has continued to mature itself. But you can't just say idle words. And when you're talking about managing team members, they know the difference in today's most popular word, authenticity. They know the difference because it's not just saying it in words, it's living it, and it's also making it actionable. So authenticity also creates action. And if you don't have the balance of both, you're really not exercising, your full truth.
This is powerful.
I'm just going to take a breather after that one.
Man, this is powerful. Okay. Let me kind of go back in time slightly to something you said. Pick apart something that Opal put out there. See if I can connect it. This is how my mind's going. It's like, so we were talking about your C-suite experience and the experience of it being lonely at the top and a lot of the different things that you have to navigate. Opal puts out there, and for a lot of our listeners, that many of our listeners are that superstar at their job, at their location, maybe in their field, maybe. No, I don't even want to say maybe. I'm pretty sure feeling and going through and experiencing some of the same things that you're experiencing, but at a different level. My question, not only for myself, but for them, is how do you navigate that? What is your support system? How do you continue to show up in places that sometimes feel like they're continuously trying to knock you down?
Yeah.
Because that can wear on folks and I think some people are looking for what are those other things I need to support me, keep me strong mentally, emotionally, to continue this fight.
Yeah. And that's real, right? That's what you just said is authentic in itself, in the sense that, and this is why you heard me say earlier, I always say I work in Disneyland, and I often tell even my peers, my industry, who have challenges trying to execute their marketing strategy because they can't align with vision. So first and foremost, when you are looking for that job, you got to know how to interview that employer just like they're interviewing you. And while it's not foolproof, and in my current role, me and my boss often laugh about our dating period. We dated on purpose. For I think it was 4 months, from September to December. And we met about 4 or 5 times at this coffee place. And we always say, Bob's is our spot, because that's where we would meet. And I'll never forget, I strung it so long. I was laughing to myself the day we met, which I knew was going to be the last time we were meeting, that she was out of breath talking to me, trying to sell herself. It was like, I just need to know right now. I said yes or no, because I'm like, I got to know, because I'm happy where I'm at. I need to know all these different things so that I can get a sense. Are you going to support me? I gave her a presentation that she wasn't expecting on one of those interviews so that I can say, hey, based on what I heard you say, this is what I would do. Are we in alignment? Is this what you're looking for? If not, we probably can go on.
Right.
She was blown away. She goes, I can take that right now and plug it right in. So we're definitely aligned. So that was a check. And I said, hey, are you going to support me for at least 2 years? I'm not saying there's affinity on these key things that I would need budgetary resource on to be able to make those initiatives move. Yes, check. So we're getting some alignment so that I don't get into the role and fail. And so very similarly, how do you in interviews make it a two-way street? And I tell my department heads, and I do the same thing when I'm hiring. I always say, when we're hiring new candidates, we thank them for their time. And we also make sure to say, hey, this is a two-way street. We want to make sure we're getting to know each other. So I want to make sure you have a bank of time to ask me questions during this interview process, in as much as I'm going to have a bank of time of some set questions. That way you're getting in alignment. Because if you're not in alignment, you get to other problems. So first and foremost, if it's a new job, you got to get that alignment with that employer. And there's certain key things in that example, as I used, there were certain things that I knew I had to have to be able to be successful. And that's just on the work side. How do you assess the personality? Ask questions about, hey, what's your communication structure in the department? And about 7.5 out of 10, there probably isn't one. So communication structure, I'll give you an example. In mine, it is I have one-on-ones each week with my department heads. I require them to have one-on-ones with their team. I have a department meeting once a month with all the departments and I have a very structured agenda on making sure that they understand what the strategy is, what the company's doing at a high level, and I have other departments share what they're doing. I also do quarterly coffees with every single person that's not a department head. I will call them and have a 30-minute virtual coffee and say, how you doing? What's going on in your world? What can I do for you? What ideas do you have? I want to make sure that I'm accessible to them. I don't want to just be locked away and them not having access to me. But that then, if somebody asks me that, which they do in interviews, they'll say, hey, how do you communicate with the team at your level? Do they get exposure? I'm like, yep, here's the structure. And people always say, wow, that's great. Because then, again, I'm setting this course of I care, I'm interested, your ideas, what you're doing matters. So you also have to interview not only for the practice and what you think you can do, what are some of those leadership traits? How do they communicate? And communication is one of the best ways to figure out how they will probably transact. So let's just say you're past that. Now you're in the environment. So that's pre-environment. If you're in the environment, one, you've got to assess how long have you been there? One, assess what have you learned? And then assess where you're trying to go next. That's step one. Step two is the person that is currently responsible for you able to do that? Are you going to get a maturity to success with that person based on those three buckets? Is two. Three, if it isn't that person, also, whether it's that person or not, contrast that with the company. What is the company trying to do? And how does that still align with the maturity of where you're trying to go for your success? Is it still possible or is it not? If it is possible, then, and if your stakeholder is not balanced to that, then maybe there's another opportunity in another department, or maybe there's another opportunity under another person. If that's still not there, then you have to accept that reality and move on. Some things aren't for everybody. And you also have to assess the size of the company. Smaller companies tend to have more weight on roles. So if you feel like, oh my God, I'm just so tired, I'm doing every single thing. You probably are, because it's a small company, but can you handle that? I've worked from at big companies. Now I'm at a medium-sized company where I have a lot on me, but I love it. I thrive in that. It's not for everybody. And so if you're in a large company, conversely, you may be very, very specialized because there's about 1 billion people. And so you feel like I can't get my hands on more and it's too hard to grow. So you have to assess the company coupled with the environment that you're in to understand what's your pathway. And I think, and I'm glad you asked that question, I think more times than not, people get stuck. I've gotten stuck before, but I always kept a dream on where I wanted to go. And so you have to still keep your eyes on your own prize. What is your aspiration? And if you take those sort of steps that I just described to understand your maturity for success, it'll start to elevate for you. And guess what? Knowing your value, you don't have to have a job. We have to have a job to survive, right? But we have to have a career. And a career will foster your passion for your success. If you're not doing something, you're happy, and you're not working with a partner that's making you happy, or as I say about my boss, I feel like I'm in Disneyland, it's probably not the place for you. And guess what? I know I'm very fortunate because, and the other thing I will tell you about being very fortunate is I finally concluded 2 years ago. I was talking with some peers, and we were just, now we're at this point of, I'm just tired now. We're at the kind of the last part of the runway of our careers. And one of the things we concluded was, there is no utopia in a job. There is no perfect job. It doesn't exist. And I think we've been programmed for so long, I got to leave here because I got to get this job. When really it is, let me manage myself at each job to know, what do I want to get out of this job? And I asked myself that probably for the last 3 or 4 jobs I've had. I finally understood that and said, what do you want out of this job? And when I start checking the box every year, did I get it? Am I growing? Am I doing these things? Do I stay? Or do I start looking for something else? Because naturally, you can hit your ceiling, right? You can grow and say, dang, I'm not doing everything, or I'm not excited. But I don't think the average person realizes that's because you've grown and you need something else. And either it's in that environment by those different boxes that I just mentioned, or you have to go somewhere else. But we spend too much time on that hamster wheel, spinning, because we don't understand how to put ourselves in a perspective for success, meaning how do I break myself down to what I'm looking for and what I aspire for? And am I around the things that can help me get there?
That was the perfect litmus test for folks in these jobs.
Yeah.
Broken down piece by piece.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'd like to work with some AI to get the manuscript. I'm dead serious, because you broke that down in a way where it's, to me, it all leads back to your personal brand. I'm going a little bit off the script here, and I know that you keep bringing that up, and it's so important. And you've kind of talked about some of the elements of developing out that personal brand. But what is your path to developing how you developed your personal brand? And obviously I can see how that has impacted everything that you do, of why you do it, how you interact with people, why you say what you say, and why the work that you do what you do. So if you could kind of share with us how you develop that personal brand and how that's helped you.
Yeah. So the personal brand is who you are and how you're selling who you are to other people. And it takes a lot of different formats, but it has to be authentic. You can't fake it. I can't walk around and say, oh, I want to be just like him. And but that doesn't feel right. It has to be something that's natural to you. And it takes a lot of forms. One is how you express yourself, how you talk and how you communicate, how you listen, how you respond to people. If you take all that up and put it under one category, that's communication, having very strong and deliberate interpersonal skills. And that's important. Second is, what's your identity? What do you look like? Do you want to come to work in a t-shirt? Do you want to have your hair a certain way? I know for me, I have my look of how I want to look as a CMO, and it's literally everything you see right now. This is my look every day, even down to the glasses. I like these glasses because it adds an element of my persona. So when I'm talking, are people taking me a certain way? Are they perceiving me as in command? He's confident. He's assured. He knows what he's talking about. All of those create your persona, but then your persona has to be rooted in values. And everything you guys asked earlier about philosophy gets behind the persona so that you can create this feeling of presence. And I love presence. And I don't know, and let me tell folks what presence is. If you think about when you walked in a room and somebody speaks or somebody gets introduced to you, you feel all of this energy. And not very many people have it. I've been seeking that and running for it because I love when I see somebody that can fill up a space. If you think of former President Obama, he can fill up a space. Former President Bill Clinton can fill up a space. For friends of mine who were journalists who, when Clinton was first running for office, said that man has such energy and personality. Like you feel like he knows you personally when he walks up to you and looks at you and shakes your hand. That is a persona. That is, what do I want people to perceive of me? It's also developing trust and integrity about who you are. If you're running a business, you've got to have some persona so that people can invest in you, so that people will follow you, so that people will come and connect you to other resources in a networking opportunity. So people will come and show up on your show. So people will talk to you. There's some integrity about who you are in your own brand persona, just like a company persona that has to be established first. Because if you don't have the confidence about what you're articulating about, whether it's your music, whether it's marketing, whether it's about multiculturalism, no one else is going to have it. But it has to be all enveloped in a certain perspective, because people walk around with bias. It's just a natural thing to psychology. But you've got to, as I was telling you earlier in my previous examples, you've got to move the smoke from that so that they look around that bias and say, oh, wow, who is that? Okay, I'm listening. You've got my attention. So that's personal persona. To develop it, though, you have to be very deliberate. And I'm going to go back, Corey, to what you were saying earlier. It's just like the compilation. There is a maturity to it. What I looked like 10 years ago in my other roles and how I came off has changed. And it's changed because I've become more confident. As I've gone to other success levels, I've been around people who I'm engaging with, who I'm learning from, and they're fostering how I should behave. And that's where who you surround yourself with comes into play. And again, that's that networking. Are you around people who have positive energy, who have positive aspirations for success? Or are you sitting around people at the water cooler that's just, oh, the world is bad and Bobby in accounting is making my life hell. I ain't got no control. I'm just going to go home and just, start all over again tomorrow.
Yep.
That's not control. That's not controlling the value that you have for yourself. And I will tell everybody that's listening, you have more control over yourself than you think. I'm going to tell you to try yourself this week. Target one or two things that you perceive is an obstacle and come up with one way that you are going to control it. And I don't mean, don't make it something that is unobtainable. And I'll just throw out some examples. If you feel like I can't control your weight, take one thing that you think you can find out by the end of the week of how you took control of that. If it's something at work that you can't figure out how to get finished, write down each day something you're going to do that's going to whittle down to getting it done. Just pick one thing. If it's your closet, if you've been wanting to clean that closet out, I did that this weekend, so I can use that one. Figure out how you're going to start. You can attack it all at once for a couple hours, or maybe you do a little bit each day. But that would demonstrate to you how much you're controlling things that you perceive are obstacles in jobs and career and launching a business. All of those things that you have aspiration on that may seem so foreign and so far away are actually more obtainable than you think. But you got to do something. Success in anything you do isn't something that rings the doorbell and say, hey, success is here. You ready to go? You've got to go outside and find success and bring them home with you. But I think that persona has to be nurtured in how you're outwardly perceiving the world. And it's also, radiated in the philosophy that you have about the world, much to all the great questions that you guys have asked today.
Thank you.
I don't know about y'all, but I got lists of homework for me to do. I mean, I feel like I should pay you. Then I feel like my company to them for what I've learned here. Oh, so dope. I wanted to get into, I think a lot of the stuff you said, and you dipped into it a little bit too, the personal brand. We got a lot of folks who are listening who are entrepreneurs, and everyone on the screen with you has at least one LLC too that we're working on. So how do you translate some of those things into your own, small business brand or the business things that you're doing? How do those things show up for that?
So I'm glad you asked that one, because I have worked with a lot of small business people who I was telling my sister recently, I'm like, man, I have such a passion even for the smaller business owner, because there's so much to help them with, but there's barriers to them getting their brand out there because of the cost, right? And so how do you support them to help them elevate? And one of the things I've noticed about small business owners is, one, not having a full defined personal brand doesn't help them speak to the vision for their company brand. And I'll give an example. I was at a friend's birthday party this summer, and they hired a bartender who had been established in that market. And the bartender showed up. By the way, the deliverables were standalone bar, a single bartender, signature drinks. The bartender was late due to a vehicle issue. Then when the bartender came, the bartender needed help from the guests to get the equipment off the truck to set up, which is now about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the customer's party. And then by the time the bartender was fully set up, about half the guests had already left and didn't get to experience what the person that bought them there to do. Kind of worked through the customer worked through that. And then the next day, the person came back to pick up their equipment, which they should have dismantled and taken with them, but did not. But then came back and yet still needed help getting everything taken out. That's not having any brand standards, meaning, hey, don't get too comfortable in thinking, oh, these are just people I know, therefore I can act that way. This is a business. And so that's where your business and your personal persona have to transcend and work together. So I'll go back through that example. Should have been there at least 20 to 30 minutes early. So if the start of the event was 7 o'clock, at 6:30, you should have been there. 6:15, everything's ready to go. You're just ready for details so that if the first guest arrived, you're ready to give them that signature, one of the signature drinks that customer asked for. You should have been present and ready to go. And was one person enough for the amount of people? I would say maybe not. Or did you ask how many people are going to be there? Therefore, how many people do I have to staff? That's part of your company brand, but your personal brand has to inform then how you want to operate, how you care about things. And then when you're leaving, what's your standard of operations for dismantling? What's your standards for setting up? What's your standards for serving? All those things create this imagination and experience for people. The world for consumers now is about personalization and about experience. And if you don't have those two things in interplay, you will not succeed because then they're not connecting with you. So in that same event, personalization would be smiling. You're there to engage. You're walking around. Did you take the signature cocktails and walk around the tray and offer them? If there's 4 of them, have 4 types so that people can select them. Then go back to the bar. Did you have nice collateral there that features that person's customized drinks? Did you come up with words that may have said, oh, you want to have the Opal S martini tonight? Things that make that customer feel like, wow, it's about me. They made my friends enjoy themselves. I'm going to remember you, and you're going to go on my Rolodex for future events. And guess what else I'm going to do? The most powerful thing you can do in marketing is I'm going to refer you to somebody. But that was lost. So that means then let's measure that out in money. The time that you spend in gas, the time that person spent as their own personal employee in putting everything together, whatever it costs for them to purchase things minus what was paid into, there's a loss, right? They've lost because the event wasn't successful. So you can cost yourself money by 1, not understanding yourself, but then 2, then having a company. What is your company about? What is the experience? Not just the product, but what is product that you have, and what is that experience, and how do you deliver that? What's the pathway to delivering that? So that, again, in that maturity of success in that one night, how are you delivering that? So always be thoughtful about, again, who you are. Hey, if I am Corey Bradley or Opal, when people come on my show, I'm going to always give them an introduction to who my audience is. I'm going to make sure my audience are connected in a certain way. You're not just going to flip on the switch and say, okay, hey, what are we talking about today? And people's ruffling and out. Okay. Oh, wait, what was next? Okay. What did you say? I'm sorry. The cat was in the back meowing. Okay. Your brand is not going to allow you to do that, right? As individuals, your brand says, I have to show up to show out in a different way. And so if you don't do it in a very measured way, that's, again, connecting people like you guys are doing today, then you turn off. An example I used to use a lot in marketing training is think of yourself when you go to a restaurant. And let's say you're the restaurant owner. You worked hard to get that restaurant. Your personal brand says, Billy's is about an experience around steaks. I show up, I've got a reservation. The first checkpoint is the servers, the host station are very nice. They're energetic. They say, follow me, sit down. Okay, great. This is nice. I like the vibe. The server comes. Hey, how are you? Welcome. Great. This is feeling like a steakhouse. I love the vibe. They're very attentive. They're very personal. So the value that's on this menu is matching to the value that I feel like I'm getting so far in the service. And then the food comes out and steak is cold. They take it back. It's raw. They take it back. But I'm the only one that doesn't have my food. The rest of my party's, hit and eat. So now the experience has started to deteriorate, right? There's no maturity and success in the evening. And no matter, and it's called service recovery in marketing and customer experience, no matter how much that server comes back and apologizes, I haven't forgotten what I came there for. It failed. Same thing, an example on the bar, the mobile bar service, where they came for drinks. But guess what? The folks left. Half the folks are gone because you were late. You didn't have any standards to operations of how you execute setup. And so that can cost you. In the restaurant example, it can cost you because my loyalty is not there. I'm not going to come back. And guess what I'm going to do in the power of our digital world? I'm gonna go right online and say, don't you go there because the service is bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have two questions, but I haven't quite been able to formulate this second one the way I would like to deliver it. So right now I'm going to go with a basic one that I think is very important for people to be able to differentiate. Branding and marketing. Can you break down the differences for folks? Because even with artists sometimes coming in, it seems like they conflate the two a lot. So we can like take that just quick step back just to make sure that they are clearly getting the ideas that you're disseminating to them and really being able to take it and know exactly what I need to do with that.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great question. So marketing and branding are, while they're in the same universe, they are two distinct operational actions. So in marketing, it is the means and the channels that you go to sell your product or service. And branding is the way that you're managing that value around that service. And so there is what's called brand equity. So if you think about what I was just describing in terms of the restaurant and describing in terms of the bar, there is a brand that has to be managed. And if I'm responding to that poorly, then I have taken away from that value, which no matter how much you're selling, that means then if you balance that out in cost, what it cost me to sell to you, and now I've got the experience, there's negative because there's a negative outcome. So that means that I'm at a loss from a business standpoint. And for me, one of the things that a lot of marketers and CMOs measure is what's called that lifetime value. How long does someone stay with me and at what cost over time? And how do I measure that and understand that? And that's protecting my brand. Marketing is how I'm selling it. And I'll be more specific with that for clarity. It's, am I using more social channels to engage my audience? Because that's where they are. So I'm going to use social platforms. Or do I have more of a diverse mix in terms of that distribution of my marketing dollars, where it could be print, some of it could be social, some of it could be other digital formats in search engine optimization or search engine marketing, where you're using a lot of the platforms under those umbrella. But it depends on where your consumer is and how you want to reach them on that marketing side. On the branding side, it becomes very specific because you're putting your logo, your mark, and all the things that communicate a message about who your brand is in those channels. They could also be community outreach. It could also be what you give back in terms of what's called good corporate citizenship, meaning, hey, as a brand, I do this for the community, because that also is a similar form of selling, but it's also creating some value about your brand and who your brand is. So there are two distinct things, but they also have a relativity and correlate to each other because they have to be in balance. Otherwise, your ROI is not going to be fluid. You're going to cost yourself money. And so a lot of people don't realize, and that's a big mistake when you're having a small business, not having those defined brand standards for your organization, meaning how do I operate? Because if I'm not managing that, everything I did to try to bring someone in is at a loss. I just went through this with our company last year, where I just finally flipped over the table to some of my operational partners who we laugh about now a year later. I'm like, I told y'all about 20 times. They were saying, oh, let's create a new tagline, Daryl, and say we're exceptional. I'm like, we're not exceptional. Didn't I just tell y'all the report for the last 5-6 months that we are not managing leads? We have $550,000 of unmanaged leads. How is that exceptional? And so it clicked with everybody finally a couple months ago. I said, all right, let's step in. And I want Daryl now to help with us with the brand strategy moving forward around our operations. So even for us as an organization, we've had to mature to that, to understand like, hey, I just can't be running around. We have standards, but we haven't taken to a brand management perspective in terms of our business operations. And that's why I see a lot of our small businesses failing to make that connection. Part of the question, Corey, on marketing is one thing. That's the investment to get someone, but then you've got to manage that brand.
Right. Can I try and see if I can formulate this second question, because I feel like some of our listeners, especially in the music space, could find some value in this, and I'm kind of picking your brain on this, because I think things have kind of fluctuated where many artists will come in, and I had we had a long conversation, I think last weekend or 2 weekends ago, about, and maybe this is more industry specific, about product and then the branding and the marketing around the product. And the argument was the artist kept hammering me about, I'm ready to go because I got the product. The product's good. I came here with the product. You heard the product. I got quality product. Let's go and put this to market. My thing was, they ain't looking for you. You have no established brand. The product is good. I agree with them. The product was good, but you don't have an established brand. People don't quite know what they're getting from you. I feel like you have to be able to sell who you are now, especially in music, along with just having the product. And then you actually need to construct a marketing plan off of that brand. But it was, and I don't know if these things have to be in perfect balance, meaning that the product has to be here and the branding and marketing needs to be here. I don't know if one's more of an alpha than the other. What type of balance should folks be looking for when it comes to that product versus that brand and marketing?
Yeah. So for music as a product, and I'll go with what you said earlier about compilation and maturity, right?
Yes.
So there is the artist.
Yes.
There is the product, the artist being the individual. Let me clarify.
Yes.
Mhm.
The product being the song.
Yes.
Two different things at its inception, right? But they have to go together. And I'll use Prince. I don't know why he popped in my head for some reason. Prince. So there's the artist, Prince, right? But he had a persona. His persona was his look. Remember I talked about my look? His look.
Mm-hmm.
He had a favorite color that he threw in with that, which he went by purple.
Yep.
He had an identity in the fonts that he was using.
Right.
In the clothes that he wore.
Right.
And so that was him, right? Now, connect the look to the songs. His songs were real cerebral. I mean,
right. Yeah.
And it made you think of this person who was like, wow, man, this guy is, you read it, it's like he's a poet, like he is deep.
Right.
And his clothes are eclectic. I can't wear them. I'm not trying to follow his fashion. In some cases, you might be trying to follow them, but they may be a trendsetter.
Right.
But they have to go together. I can't wear a spacesuit and then sing a rap song. Right. Because then that identity, again, that persona, that personal brand is canceling out what I'm singing and the genre of music in which I'm singing. So in that sense, it's thinking about the genre. What do I want to look like to that genre? If I'm a songstress, you're probably not wearing, a overly revealing outfit. And I'm not saying that hopefully, it's not offensive to some women and how they want to express themselves. But a songstress, I think of someone that's a established R&B 90s artist that is a little different in how they present and dress versus more modern. It is a different way of expressing yourself through fashions to connect to your audience. But if you don't have that identity first, connected with what's your product first, those are the first steps. Then the second step is who are you trying to reach? And so going back to Corey, what your argument was, do they know you? And so if you started on, and some artists have started locally, right? So let's just take Prince. He started very locally in Minneapolis. So he had a value locally. And so he could further mature that value. Again, there's that word, maturity for success.
Yeah.
Mature that value. So, let's take in, what did we do well locally? And I do a birthday trip every year with friends, and we went to Minneapolis 2 years ago, and we toured his stuff. So it's probably why he's in my head. But who he was locally matured a little differently when he became national and global. Became very different. But that was his maturity. He matured his book. He also matured. His songs stayed very much the same. It was this urban expression that was both grounded in some sense of what's going on in reality, but then also just being imaginative artistically about the world. Right. But then when he started getting to that more artistic aspiration about the world, so did his outfits, right? And so the energy of his shows. And then he was branding that in different ways to connect to people. But what he started off at that little small studio in Minneapolis doing and communicating locally, he took the best success of some of those pieces, but then he also had to imagine other components to connect to other audiences. And certainly the music industry and that identity is very competitive and very difficult. And you have to have them defined. And it is a balance. They're not in equilibrium, but there's a balance. And it's very delicate. And so, yes, you can show up with all the music, and Prince did. He showed up with all the music he wanted,
Mhm.
But as you well know, Corey, the record labels, depending on how your contract's structured, they're going to define you.
Mm-hmm.
That was Prince's
Absolutely.
argument. And when he decided to become the artist formerly known as Prince,
Mhm.
what a lot of people don't realize was he took it. Oh, this is all coming full circle.
Mhm.
He knew his value and he took it back.
Yeah.
And I didn't know until I went on this trip. I always thought, oh, he's just kind of crazy and weird. But no, he wasn't. He was brilliant. What he did was, oh, I'll fix you. The three things about Prince, and Corey, this will resonate with you, was he could write, he could sing, and he could produce. And those are the three things that go with music. And most people can sing, in which case the record label's providing you with writers,
Yep.
producers. He could do all three, and he couldn't be contained. The man could write something in the middle of the night, be his own producer, engineer, all the above, and wake up and say, look what I did last night.
Mhm.
That's a rare thing, right?
Very much.
And so what he did was he owned and knew who he was and took his value. And because of how the legalese went, I'm just watering it down. He basically said, I know how to get around this. I'll make up something that really isn't my name, and I'm going to produce music for the next 10 years. And guess what? You can't own that.
Right.
I'll still have my royalties and my relationship from the first 20 years of stuff. But going forward, you won't own it. And then guess what he did? Changed his name back.
Mhm.
Again, he took control over that.
Yep.
But all of that, and it goes right back what you said earlier, Corey, it's compilation. It's a maturity. It's steps. And I think what happens is there's an eagerness sometimes when people step out with business, or again, in this case, you've got this identity about who you are. There's a lot of ego that comes into play sometimes.
Mhm.
And you've got to be able to check that ego and have some reality and grounding yourself to know I've got to be patient and take these steps to get to where I want. It doesn't happen overnight. And certainly in the music industry, that's so competitive and it's so much stuff to be conscious of. If you go too fast, you can also fall very fast.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Now I just got to cut this part out and then have them.
It's like,
My job is
see?
done.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mhm. That Prince analogy was awesome. Like you need a TED Talk if you don't have one already. That was
Mhm.
Thank you.
so fire.
Yeah, that was definitely fire. I'm interested in your perspective on marketing and artificial intelligence. I've been seeing a lot of tools online. I've been seeing, Chat GPT. I'm not gonna lie, I've used it for email many times.
Yeah.
Get together like ideas that are just kind of scraped together and kind of prompted it, how to use it. So I guess what's your thought on this new technology and
Yeah.
how it's going to be used in just in marketing in
Yeah.
general, branding and business operations?
Well, perfect timing for that question because I do a multi-year marketing strategy. And I'm getting ready to do 24 to 26. And as part of that journey, I had my boss lock arms with me, I should say, in the last 2 months where I've been going to some of my current marketing vendors and trying to understand what their blueprint is. How can they help me elevate to the next level with that? And a lot of what I do, the end user is our site level people, our leasing associates at the site level, and some of their managers and how they deliver the experience to the customer for sales and for resident experience. And so it's things like how can I make their life more efficient on the requirements that I have for them in their daily requirements through AI. And some of the first and foremost, let me say, the first couple of weeks that I had my boss sit with me, and she loves technology. So I'm like, you can partner with me. I want you to understand what I understand because this is going to be a big journey. There's a cost, there's this. So she goes, no, it's perfect. I want to do this. So I had her sit in some meetings, and we both, by the end of that week, were like, my head hurts. Like, this is both scary and it is very complex. And depending on your particular business practice, you really got to understand it because it's getting to some scary levels. On the scary side, one of the things that Google is doing, which is both, it's kind of upsetting the apple cart, but they have a nobility in why they're doing this, is that the opportunity for fraud is going to be even. It has potential to be exponential.
Oh, sure.
And so now I don't think for those of you who use, if you're familiar with an app called Reface or Giphy, you used to be able to find artists on there and stick your face onto it and ha ha ha. And I use it a lot. I still use Reface a lot, but I used to get famous people and put my face on it, friend's face, and send it out. I went back in March to do it and I couldn't find anybody. I'm like, where's everybody at? I can't find all these faces. And I realized oh, with AI now, there's all these legalities that are coming out to protect people's identity. But even with that being a form of entertainment, in the world of AI, you can take that to a whole nother level. So on the political level, even for governments, someone could potentially imitate a head of state and cause some national security challenges. And so in some, you really have to start thinking about what are those guardrails you have to put around your business practice to do that. A partner that I'm working with that has a bot that we use currently, we were going through that with them, and they've already built over 400 and some thousand guardrails around the system just to protect consumers when they're interacting with our teams and what's going out. And there's this thing in Chat GPT right now that's called hallucinations. And hallucinations basically means in the content that you're trying to build, when you ask it a question, you have to understand that the content is only relevant up to the year 2021. So anything that may be beyond 2021, you're asking a question on, that content that comes back can be wrong. And that's what they call hallucinations. So if you say, write me a speech from, the debate last night. It may come back and say, in 1976, George Bush said, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, that's wrong. And it's because right now the content has not caught up with, the governance and how that AI is being extracted. So you have to have a wall around it to understand it. And the way we're perceiving it is, and was told by a vendor, is we're no longer creating content, but we're supervising content as using AI, because you're going to have some ability to understand, like, yes, I asked for something. Yes, I got it back. But how do I then have a operational standard that I can see what it's saying to say, yes, this is approved, and it moves on? And so Google's doing a lot to try to ensure that businesses are authentic and who they say they are. It's painful on the other hand, because you have to reclaim your business over and over again. And once you get down that dark hole with them, because they're all algorithms. And by the way, there's no phone number for Google, not one. And they're the only business I know that can get away with it. Some days I wish, I wish we could not have a number. The residents don't get to call us and yell at us about stuff. But, they're the only people I know globally, and I call them the digital mafias, that can get away with not having a number. And that's so what's very frustrating is they're going through this verification process as they're taking their platform to the AI model. It's hard. And while you can go to other search engines like, what's the new one? DuckDuckGo.
Yep.
Say there's no spy, there's no blah, blah, blah. That's great to an extent, but if you're a business, it isn't, because the biggest engine right now is Google. And so they control, when you really stop and think about it, they control the world. And so anybody trying to understand that, particularly a small business, you really want to start doing your homework to understand what's the current governance, what's the controls around your practice. And again, as you're going from not being a content creator to a content supervisor, what does that mean for your business practice every day? Because it's exciting, but it's scary. And a lot of the folks that I've been talking to on the technology side, the technology providers, have said, hey, this is going to rival the internet when it came out. Like it's a whole new direction of being able to engage. It's exciting, but just understanding the concerns around it is key. So that's on the bad side. I would say the bad side, on the things that you really need to be conscious of. On the positive side, your ability to really be able to engage your consumers in a much more robust way is exciting. And again, now that we're out of the brick and mortar opportunities to have a business and we're more in the digital space, that's only going to be much more enhanced. So for you to have a business now, may not have to have an assistant or have to hire other people or outsource. You now have the opportunity to do it yourself. There's not only what's called conversational AI tools, which is what AI is built off of to engage. There's also formats that also can help with artwork. I just had one the other day pop in my box. Like, see how that was going to work for. I have a creative services team, so I want to understand. Okay, what does that product typology mean for them, and how are they going to better engage? So there's lots of different platforms within that conversational AI that can engage your business, but you really got to start doing the homework. There's a lot of folks coming out saying, I've got this Chat GPT, I've got this AI tool. And again, what's your business about before you step into that? And it's early right now. So you don't want to go too fast, because everybody's popping up with some, I would say 1.0 format, but it's a very elementary format, because it's a highly fastly evolving, technology.
Mhm. I love the way you put folks serving as supervisors for the AI, for the content
Right.
versus creating the content. That was such a cool way to put it. Really nice to articulate that. I want to kind of build off of that piece too. You mentioned earlier, I think when you were talking about PBS and going into the digital era, and I think you said something like clipping big birds' wings.
Yeah.
What parallels are you seeing, and what do you think, as you're always talking about building and maturity of success, what has gone through that allowed you to kind of approach AI with this? It just seems like you have a very calm position of here's the good, here's the bad, here's what we need to look out for, versus somebody who's getting flustered thinking about their creative folks and jobs.
You know, that's a great question. And I've thought about that in other perspectives recently, but you made me think about it a different way. And I think the reason why I have that calmness with it is one, that maturity of my success and having to have on board and rolled out technology in different organizations, knowing that there's four phases, if you will, when you're rolling out technology for adoption in your respective organizations. One is you're going to have early adopters. Those are people. And by the way, it's not just these four stages of adoption aren't just applied to when you're doing something in your organization with technology, but it also applies to consumerism in general. So when new products also on board. So you have early adopters who are like, yeah, I got to have that new iPhone 57 2B. I don't care if it's $9,000 off the bat. I got to have it. And then you've got the adopters when the product then has now been in the market. And so, Corey, also think of this perspective when you're talking to your artists. You know, there is the early adopters who know you, and then there's adopters, now they know you. And so that's the maturity. Adopters for consumerism are people like, I'll date myself here. When VHSs came out and then became DVDs, when people realized, oh, you're still using the VHS, you know, there's a DVD. Okay, I'm gonna get it. And now the cost has come to a market cost that's affordable versus in the early adoption stage, it's high because of that exciting new demand and the onboarding to market. Then you get late adopters like, oh my God, you still using that old raggedy? Nobody use that. Nobody use CDs anymore. It's all about streaming. And so then consumers, I know, I just haven't bought it. And of course, that price now in the market has gone down. Right. Same thing where you can overlay to those artists, how is their persona maturing and being adopted? And then you have resistors who just usually don't find value. And it's usually it usually can be defined by generational. So, you have your boomers and maybe your Gen Xers who don't see a value in certain things versus your younger generations who are all about technology and they're more proactive and engaged with it. Whereas like I'll use my grandparents when, and this is really old, when call waiting came on, I would be at my grandmother's house on the phone, baby, get off the phone. Somebody trying to call me. Anybody trying to call here because then But for $6 and for their generational, they just didn't see the value of having call waiting, so they just didn't do it. And in organizations and adoption too, some people by generational are slow resistors, even though there may be a policy. You almost have to write them up to get them to perform or disconnect them from whatever that process may be. When you say, hey, this is sunsetting, we're going on to the next evolution. And so having gone through that, I understand that there's that word maturity to that adoption and that technology, and understanding that it isn't, as I say often, it isn't one and done. And they laugh at work because I often call things by 1.0, 2.0. I use the cellular adoption of things. And I always tell my teams, just because we roll this out doesn't mean that we're not continuing to grow it. Right. And so I think that's what gets me to that, Opal, is I've done it enough. And even in my own personal experience, I can look back and say, wow, I remember when phones didn't, when there was call waiting. I remember when there was no cable. I remember when there was just 3 channels. And all that has been an evolution for me as a personal consumer, but also as a business consumer and business leader, as I also understand that transition. And even back to my days at PBS, that was pre, HD. And I remember thinking, you can splice up channels. I wonder what that's going to look like. So we can have 12 channels at one. What is that going to mean? I understood it conceptually, but it wasn't until it was launched. I'm like, aha, now I can see how this signal got spliced up and digitized in a way that you can do more with that signal than we could when we were in the analog format. Nice. And we've seen that with music too. It's evolved and video content, it's become, streaming, and you can see the clamps and governance there, just like with AI. There's those governance that's going to happen, just like if you guys remember Napster, when that was one of the first. You had to put some governance on it, right, to manage that content. So think of AI in that same context, that just like with streaming, when streaming first came out, there was all these legalities that had to be defined it's going to be the same way now in content supervision.
Mm. I feel like we're gonna need an update on this type of conversation in about a year.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's moving fast. Yeah.
The way things are moving and how many people are now getting into that market.
Yep.
It's really incredible. Every day I see 5 different ways to do things via AI. And it's just really changing, industries, and including the industry that I'm in, a whole heck of a lot. So,
absolutely.
Oof. All right. I want to be respectful of time, and hopefully, if we send something out, in a year, maybe we can do that update with you, and really gather that perspective of where things are going. Because I still got some old questions, if I'm gonna be honest, from stuff off here, and then once I edit it, I'm probably gonna have a few more. But we are interested, and we are always interested because we pick up some great titles. What are you reading? What book recommendations would you give us right now that you think would be of interest to us and our listeners?
Yeah, so I just started reading 2 things. One is Stacey Abrams has a book called Lead from the Outside, which when you read things sometimes, I often don't read it for its specific context, but I also read it for what is it conceptually saying and how can I apply that strategically and philosophically. And so I would almost describe it as a handbook to leadership. And it also takes some perspective too on different groups, from women, people of color, LGBTQ, and how those groups can lead in environments that are traditional, if you will. And so if you consider looking at her story and how she came up and was, the speaker in the Georgia House, and then how she came onto the political scene, certainly she's got a lot to inform through that. And so I'm about halfway through that. The other is a little bit of an older one by Julian Bond, and it's called Black Leaders on Leadership. And it looks at a lot of segmented, more political themes on leadership and how to engage in that space. And again, these are, as you can hear, they're all leadership titles for me at the moment that I'm into. But those are 2 that I'm currently looking at.
Beautiful. Yeah, those ones, both of those sound great. Stacey Abrams is just brilliant.
Yeah,
she's just one of those people that's like, anything you do, I know you're going to be successful. You're going to be at the top. She is brilliant.
Yeah. And she's not getting, I think, enough credit or full appreciation around taking Georgia purple. I think she was a huge part of, she was the big bomb that dropped in the water and created that tsunami that got that state purple, which is coming from the deep South in politics. That is phenomenal.
Absolutely. So, folks who listeners got 2 good ones. To start with on top of some of the other ones that we recommended. But man, we appreciate you so much for coming on and taking the time to speak with us, indulge us in some of our questions and things of that sort, and really incredibly informative. And I really hope folks really dig into this. Folks need to dig into all the episodes, but there's a lot of things here that you do need to put on repeat and kind of sit and think about. I find myself being very reflective in this conversation as far as, there's a lot of things that I need to analyze about how I'm moving forward in the space that I'm moving in, and the way you set out a lot of things, and the way it was very step by step. So it was something that was easy to say, you know what, I need to think about that and maybe need to make that change or make that pivot. But then 2, okay, it's been laid out in such a nice step by step process that it doesn't feel overwhelming that I can't get to that destination. I think sometimes when you get information, you get a lot of information, it's like, oh, that seems like a lot. How do I actually get to that point in which the change is being made? Because it feels overwhelming. But so much appreciation the way that you were able to kind of cut and dice things up in a manner that's digestible and a manner that's easy to follow. And that's hard to do. And, you know, how you've done it has just been incredible and amazing. So I can't thank you enough for the value that you've added to this conversation and to so many people that'll be listening.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I echo all of that and would add incredibly inspirational. I was a fan before this, but dang.
You're going on the wall, Dale. You're going on the wall.
I'm going to go look at my closet and reevaluate some things. Thank you. This is
my
great.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. You, I echo with Corey and Opal said. It was just, I want to talk to you more. Corey, you gonna cut us off. Daryl, I understand you got things to do. I do too. The sun might start going down, but I really appreciate you sharing.
Yes, my pleasure.
What you did and what you've done and what you're working on and the perspectives. I know people are going to get a lot of value out of what we talked about today and what you shared from many different perspectives, not just working in a business or, trying to be an entrepreneur, but just living life. So, I appreciate everything you shared today.
And I want to thank you guys too for having this platform, and certainly not only on behalf of myself, and certainly I'm sure I speak on behalf of your audience. You guys are also connecting voices and connecting thoughts and perspectives through your work. So thank you for taking your time to give back to the community and help, message and tell stories that create inspiration for people. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. You know where you can find us. We're going to start with that linktree/Black Currency Podcast. That will get you linked to everything we have going on, from video to social media, and all those things for those people who can't see us right now. I'm going to still shout out some of those other links. Social media, make sure to hit us up, Facebook and IG at BLK Currency Podcast. If you're looking for the video, you can find the video at Spotify, but you can also find it on youtube.com/radio22. And you can find this episode and some of our previous episodes at myradio22.com/BLK Currency Podcast. If you tune into Radio 22 Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., you will be able to hear some of the older podcasts and some of the newer podcasts we'll be pointing out. So if you go to the myradio22.com, and you can go and listen in wherever you're at. Mr. Smith, I appreciate your time and you joining us today on this podcast. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
All right. And for our listeners, we appreciate you listening in. Let us know what you think. Please leave your comments, ideas, things of that sort. And we'll catch you all next time. Have a great one. Peace.
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 Bye.